Israel held its second parliamentary election of the year last month. The center-left upstart Blue and White Alliance edged out Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's Likud party in the September 17th election, seemingly ending his decade-long run as prime minister.
Yesterday, Blue and White leader General Barry Gantz, he called off unity talks with Netanyahu and Likud, stating that the stage for Gantz to be tasked with forming a government after a chaotic couple of weeks. To make matters even more complicated, pre-trial hearings began today in the Netanyahu corruption case that could see the prime minister face a 10-year prison term if he's convicted. Joining us to unpack all of this is the journalist and analyst on international politics and culture, Neri Zilber. He's an adjunct fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Neri, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
Great to see you, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So, Neri, I mean, this is a very complicated situation. There have been 2 elections. Now, Netanyahu tried to form a government. Just explain to the viewers a little bit of the past about what happened and what it looks like might happen in the future. I know that's very uncertain.
Right. So I think, number one, people need to keep in mind that Israel has a parliamentary system, multi-party election. So really, whoever, quote unquote, wins needs to form a parliamentary majority. That Netanyahu wasn't able to do back in May, which triggered the second election. And what happened about 2 weeks ago was pretty much more or less the same result, a bit worse for Netanyahu, but the end result being the same, that he doesn't have a clear path to a parliamentary majority, but neither does his challenger, Benny Gantz, in the Blue and White Party. So right now, the state of play is that there's a deadlock. Game of chicken between Netanyahu's Likud and Gantz's Blue and White over who will blink first. That's, I think, the big picture situation. The small picture situation is that Netanyahu himself is really the impediment to any kind of national unity government, which seems to be the most realistic path forward. He's, as you mentioned, facing a slew of corruption charges. Pre-trial hearing is starting today. Blue and White has said that they won't sit with a prime minister under indictment. So that really, Netanyahu himself is really the main impediment at the moment. But he doesn't seem to want to step aside or go anywhere for the time being.
And just to clarify on that, is it really the issues around the corruption that are the problem with Netanyahu, or are some of his hardline stances more at issue here?
So it's less about policy. It's not even so much political, because in Israeli politics, seemingly the impossible is usually possible. But really, it comes down to the person of Bibi Netanyahu. So there's the corruption, looming corruption indictment on the one hand. Also, a big portion of the country is simply dead set against having their representatives, the people they voted for, sitting in government with Netanyahu, sitting under Prime Minister Netanyahu. And then to further complicate matters, Netanyahu has done a pretty good job since election night of rallying his right-wing base, his right-wing allies in various smaller parties to his right, as well as the ultra-Orthodox parties, have stuck with him. And even more importantly, his own Likud party has stuck with him. No real coup attempt from within. So at the moment, he's sitting pretty solid in terms of his right-wing support.
So, Neri, there's been some changes, I know, among, I think the Arab list endorsed Benny Gantz. Does that change the dynamics at play here at all when he's trying to form a government?
Not quite, because the Arab-Israeli parties historically, and even their move last week, they're not quite amenable themselves, and neither is the Israeli political system amenable to them actually being part of any future government. So what they did was recommend Gantz to the president in terms of their recommendation to who should be prime minister, but neither they nor Gantz himself actually believes they'll really be part of any future Israeli government.
And so what is holding Gantz up from being able to form a government? I understand the corruption issues on Netanyahu's side, but what's the problem for Gantz? What are the barriers there?
So similar to Netanyahu, he just doesn't have the numbers. He doesn't have the numbers to get to the magic 61, which is a 1-seat parliamentary majority in the 120-seat parliament here. So for him, his options are quite limited because, as I mentioned, Netanyahu's right-wing allies haven't defected yet. They haven't defected, and the Likud hasn't opposed Netanyahu and come towards Benny Gantz and Blue and White. So Gantz himself doesn't have a clear path to a majority, although in theory he might have a few options that Netanyahu doesn't.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the future here, it looks deadlocked. Is there going to be another election? Is that what the big fear in Israel is right now?
Well, I can speak for the media class here, and as well as the overriding public sentiment. Nobody wants a third election. A second election was unprecedented in Israeli political history. That's never happened in and of itself. A third one would just be whatever the word for great or unprecedented is.
Yeah.
But having said that, there's a process that still needs to unfold in the coming weeks and potentially for the next 2 months up to December. So Netanyahu currently holds the option or the possibility of forming a government. If he fails, the opportunity moves to Benny Gantz. He has about a month himself. Even if he were to fail, there is a potential third round of negotiations and backroom dealings that could deliver at least a candidate that would have a third shot to form a government.
Got it.
And only after that would elections be triggered.
So then final question for you here, which is how does this affect relations with the United States? If Gantz were to become the prime minister, how would that affect the relations with the U.S.?
Well, I think it's no secret that Netanyahu and President Trump have grown very, very close. Netanyahu himself has put a lot on Trump himself, obviously to the detriment of Israel's relationship with the Democratic Party. We saw it this past summer with the congressional trip that wasn't, the permit to allow various Democratic lawmakers to come to Israel. I think a Prime Minister Gantz would move to repair ties with the Democratic Party.
That's interesting.
Very interesting. Keep us updated, Neri. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Neri.
My pleasure.
Next on Rising, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. He's got a new ad out. How will that 60-second message impact the campaign?
And a billionaire has a message for Bernie, and some candidates' coffers continue to grow while others appear to be a bit stagnant or falling. Team Rising is coming up to talk about all the things.